Today is August 18th, 2020, and we do have a quorum. We are not taking any official action today. Today is to sort of catch up on some housekeeping items that we did not complete during the regular session. We will not be taking any votes today. We will not be making any recommendations today. But I felt it was important for us to at least catch up on some items that needed to get done during regular session that were diverted and suspended as a result of the COVID situation. So we will probably have another interim hearing. And for those of you who've not seen the notification, there is a joint there's a joint meeting between Commerce and Energy and Utilities on Commissioner Kelly's confirmation that is scheduled for Friday. If you haven't received that notification, let me know and I'll get it forwarded over to you. Today we have one item. I'm hoping to spend an hour or hour and a half. I do want to adjourn by 2:30 this afternoon. On PUC Commissioner Joe Sullivan. Commissioner Sullivan was appointed by the Wallace administration earlier this year, and you should have the resume in front of you. If you don't, I can have Owen send it over to you. So let me know. You can send it through, send a text message or an email to Owen if you didn't get that. So at this point, what we will do is take commentary from the applicant first, and then we will open it up for questions from the committee. So Commissioner Sullivan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Senator Osmek, and members of the committee. It's nice to be here today. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Joseph Sullivan, and I am a commissioner on the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission. Today, I'm coming to you from my home in Mankato. My wife, Kara, and I and our two daughters have lived in Mankato for 7 years. My wife is a doctor at the Mankato Clinic, and our daughters go to school here in the city in Mankato. Today, I'm glad to answer any questions the committee may have regarding my resume, cover letter, work history, regulatory philosophy, or to explain my votes on any of the dockets I have voted on since starting my appointment on April 6th, 2020. First, the Commission is a quasi-judicial body primarily concerned with just and reasonable rates, reliable service, and the enforcement of state energy policy. In furtherance of this statutory mission, and as a quasi-judicial commission, the role of the Public Utility Commissioner is to make decisions based on the statutes, the rules, and past decisions of the Commission as they pertain to the record before them. The regulatory record is in many cases complex and therefore requires thoughtful and thorough review, along with deep study of the relevant and controlling statutes and rules. Because the role of the Public Utility Commissioner is not to be an advocate, the Commission is not a cabinet agency. The Commission is independent and neutral. Much like a court, independence and neutrality are the source of the PUC's authority, and I take this responsibility very seriously. Every Thursday, we make decisions that can impact Minnesotans positively or negatively in their pocketbooks, their place of employment, and in the air they breathe. Minnesotans must trust that these decisions were made fairly and impartially. Today, I am an economic regulator, not an advocate. So as a regulator, the question I ask with every case that comes before me is, what is the legislative intent that guides this record? In determining the legislative intent, I draw upon my experience and training as an attorney to review the statutes, rules, and case law, and my long experience working within the energy industry. As to my relevant experience, I started my legal and professional career in 2004 after I graduated from law school. I worked at the law firm Flaherty & Hood from early 2006 until 2012. In addition to working on behalf of greater Minnesota cities like Rochester, Mankato, Winona, Moorhead, and many others on non-energy related issues like wastewater treatment, transportation, and property taxes, I led the firm's energy work by representing the large municipal electric utility Missouri River Energy Services. For MRES, I worked with their member Minnesota cities to ensure that Minnesota's energy policy accommodated the unique needs of a public power utility. I'm very proud of the work I did at Flaherty, representing the power plant host community cities of Becker, Red Wing, Cohasset, Monticello, Hoyt Lakes, Oak Park Heights, and Granite Falls. At Flaherty, I also represented the city of Red Wing and Monticello on nuclear waste issues because of the federal government's failure to remove waste from Minnesota. In 2012, I left Flaherty and started working at Wind on the Wires. At Wind on the Wires, I represented a coalition of renewable energy developers, manufacturers, and clean energy advocates in 5 upper Midwestern states, including Minnesota. We worked throughout the upper Midwest on increasing and developing new transmission to enable the lowest cost resource, wind energy, for our region. Additionally, in Minnesota, I'm very proud of the bipartisan work we did removing regulatory barriers for independent power providers. This legislation, co-authored by Representative Pat Garofalo and Senator John Marty, passed in 2014 and has already led to the construction of new wind farms in Minnesota and the creation of Minnesota jobs. One of the things I'm most proud of from my work at Wind on the Wires is that I was one of the first people in Minnesota to recognize that Minnesota's largest power plants would be retiring. Today, this is common knowledge, but in 2012 and 2013, it was high level and not known with any specificity. This work has now become foundational in the energy community and has helped host communities, labor, and policymakers understand the transition and transformation underway today. In 2014, I went to work with the Center for Energy and Environment. At CEE, I managed our legislative affairs work and worked with policymakers and regulators on many energy efficiency, clean energy, and regulatory issues. At CEE, I also continued to develop the Minnesota Power Plant Retirement Study work and worked closely with the Coalition of Utility Cities to build upon that research and data necessary to address the impacts of these retirements in their host communities. When I left CEE, this work continued and has been consolidated into a formal report, which I believe has been presented to you in the committee and will be included in upcoming Excel and Minnesota Power Rate resource plans. While at CEE, because of my work for consumer-owned utilities, I also recognize the importance of highlighting the innovation and creativity of Minnesota's electric cooperatives. This work has gone on to change the way that many clean energy advocates and policymakers view our electric co-ops. It was also important in the development and understanding that formed the basis of the coalition behind Senator Rarick's eco legislation. As you are all aware, I was appointed to be the Deputy Commissioner at the Division of Energy Resources in the Department of Commerce at the start of the Walz and Flanagan administration. As the Deputy Commissioner, I worked to ensure that host community voices were heard within the department and the administration. I also realigned the department to better serve Minnesotans. And lastly, I was instrumental in organizing bipartisan governors across and throughout the Mid-Continent to push the MISO, the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, to model and start the process of developing new transmission resources. Taken together, these positions have prepared me to understand the policies and issues considered by the Commission. However, I recognize that these are different roles, and my job as a commissioner is not to be an advocate or to represent a client. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today and look forward to any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We do have a couple of testifiers that I'd like to go to before we go into questioning. We have one, let's see if I can see it on the screen. If you're in the meeting, raise your hand if you're here as a testifier so I can get to you. I don't see any hands going up, so we won't.
Senator, Kevin Pranis wants to testify. Why don't you go to him first?
Yeah, Mr. Pranis, feel free to unmute yourself and begin your testimony.
Thank you very much, Chair Osmek and committee members, for the opportunity. You've heard from us before. My name is Kevin Pranis, and I represent LiUNA, Minnesota, and North Dakota, which in turn represents over 12,000 construction workers and their families across Minnesota and North Dakota. And just to explain why this is an important confirmation hearing for us. We've learned over the past few years through many proceedings, including Line 3 pipeline, how crucial decisions made by the Public Utility Commission are to the lives and livelihoods of our members, who don't just build and maintain energy projects. We also pay energy bills. We work for contractors that pay bigger bills, often on projects for industrial customers who pay even bigger bills on energy. We also live in communities that relied on coal and nuclear plants, and we have members living in communities that are seeing solar and wind expand rapidly. And it's critically important for us that we have a well-functioning commission, especially in a time of a rapidly changing energy landscape, when our members are concerned about what those changes mean for them. And when we've seen, we think, unfortunately, increasing polarization in the conversations around energy, which are getting in the way often of sensible conversations about energy policy and projects. And so the commission is, a rock in that storm, or should be, that is properly implementing the law, like looking at the considerations of all stakeholders, not just the ones who show up most often or have the most resources, and finding the decisions that are consistent with the law and the rule and the facts, right, and that serve the public interest as defined by the legislature. We think this is important now more than ever, and I can't think of any nominee that we would feel more confident putting the fates of our members and our organization in their hands than Joe Sullivan. I think not only for our members as union members and construction workers, but for any ratepayer, for anyone who lives in a host community, for really any citizen of the state of Minnesota. I've had the really good fortune to be able to work with Joe, and I've seen a couple things about him that I think the committee should know. One is that he is, unusually unafraid to make hard decisions that don't please his friends. Certainly, I'm sure there's many friends disappointed with his vote on Line 3, but we experienced this very early on when we were concerned about the heavy reliance on out-of-state workers to build wind energy projects. And Joe was part of the clean energy community, and he did a lot of work and advocacy, and I think, frankly, strained a lot of his own friendships and, frustrated his friends with how strongly he pressed them because he saw it was important. He's the first person, when he describes the plant closings, he's the first person who came to the building trades to say, look, we know this is your livelihood, and your livelihood's going to be changing a lot, and you should be aware so you can be at the table, right? I think that was critically important and showed his ability to bring people together and his commitment, across all different stakeholder groups. I got a chance to know him personally, and the thing that's most important about his character, which to us is critical to this commission, is that obviously Joe's concerned about climate change, but he's just as concerned about the possibility that high electric rates are going to put businesses out of business or chase them out of Minnesota, costing jobs for Minnesota workers. I know that because we have those conversations, and I have a sense of what keeps him up night. And he's as likely to be staying up night worrying about high electric rates for residential or industrial customers as he is to be worrying about sea level rise, or to be worrying about what happens to host communities when plants close, and making sure that there's a plan for them. So if we're looking for a nominee who is listening to all the stakeholders and understands why it's so important that we have a process that brings everyone together and that follows a process that everyone can rely on, I don't think we could ask for anyone better than Joe. Appreciate the time for this commission, and very much hope that that we get a favorable confirmation at some point in the future when the legislature is reconvened. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pranis. Are there any other testifiers who wish to speak on behalf or against the nominee? If so, raise your hand or try and make a gesture and put your camera on. I do not see any more. So at this point, we'll take questions from committee members. I'll start out, and then I'll go to Ranking Member Simonson and open it up then to the rest of the committee. Commissioner Sullivan, you made a comment in your presentation about just and reasonable. Will you please expand upon that? What do you mean by that terminology?
Sure. Senator Osmek, what I mean by just and reasonable is that the project or the facility or the program, whatever the utility is proposing to the commission, that there is there's a clear ratepayer benefit, that there's a system benefit to it, and that those costs are that they have looked at all of the alternatives, that we have looked at all the alternatives, and that there's a clear benefit to the project, to the cost, that all ratepayers are going to be benefiting from this particular project. And if it meets that metric, then it is a just and reasonable cost.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. It helps a little bit, but when people throw around, Commissioner Sullivan, when people throw around the term just, I immediately start asking questions, because whether something is just or unjust is hardly, in my opinion, an objective viewpoint. We have had a number of issues in the last 6 months about justice. That I'd like to know more about. What do you mean by something necessarily being just, as opposed to objective determination based upon the facts?
Well, what I mean is actually that it is objective, Senator Osmek. I mean that it is objective, that a cost that the utility has identified in a resource plan, that the utility has that the applicant has identified under its certificate of need, or any of the various permits that it needs to seek, that there's a process around determining was that cost, was that program, is that necessary for ratepayers? Is that necessary for the system? That's what I mean by just, is that that there's actually an objective grounding to it. A just and reasonable cost is something that is not arbitrary. A just and reasonable cost is something that has clear ratepayer benefit. A just and reasonable cost is a wind farm or a natural gas facility or a nuclear power plant that's operating. Does that answer your question?
I think it's helping, but I'll move on to another question. During your presentation, you discussed lowest cost in being wind. We also know that some of these renewables are certainly intermittent in their power output, that while wind and solar may be becoming more price competitive, and in some cases, wind contracts, we do know, are actually undercut under the carbon-based fuel, particularly coal, at certain points, but not necessarily all the time. We also understand the intermittency of that particular source. How does that intermittency play into your determination on wind being a primary source as opposed to an intermittent source for Minnesotans going into the future?
Sure. Senator Osmek, I mean, what you said is absolutely accurate. I mean, wind is an intermittent resource, and as we all know, and I don't think it's controversial to say, but we need a reliable system. We need a low cost system. We need to make sure that people are not going to settle if the lights go off. And that's a critical component of the analysis that we at the Commission entertain, as making sure that the system is reliable. So wind is a critically important part of the system because it provides low cost energy. But there is a capacity issue with wind, and I mean, you will get no argument from me, no quarter from me, that we need to have a network of resources to make sure that the lights always come on, that we have 24/7, 365 reliability. I mean, that's a critical component of what the Commission does, is to ensure that reliability is there. And that is yeah. So
one final question from me. In your cover letter, you make reference to a term that I need you to expound upon. You use the term decarbonization, or decarbon, in a couple of paragraphs, and that for me does raise red flags, because while decarbonization and reducing the carbon that goes in the atmosphere is obviously something that is good and a benefit, in the same respect, having power, and now California is learning this the hard way with rolling brownouts and blackouts, that decarbonization and focusing, making that a priority can lead to disastrous consequences within Minnesota's energy grid. I need you to make me comfortable with the fact that decarbonization is a goal, but when it comes to energy, it cannot be the overriding goal. Is that a reasonable statement of your position, or could you expound upon that, please?
Sure, Senator Osmek. When I'm referring to decarbonization and clean energy, first of all, I think they're important. I like clean energy. I think decarbonization is important. And I think that there's a couple things there, though. The first is I'm recognizing a clear macro trend that we're seeing. Utilities make these. They're making their own goals for decarbonizing and clean energy. We're seeing this throughout the country, throughout the nation, throughout the world. These are big macro trends that I think are good things. But there is clear direction within Minnesota state law we have the state's carbon goals under 216H. We have the renewable preference statute. We have the renewable energy standard. So we have authorities that call for, from a policy perspective, from the statutory perspective, for clean energy and decarbonization. But what I am talking about here in my cover letter regarding decarbonization and clean energy is I'm recognizing these larger macro trends, but I was also telling the governor that, look, it's more than just this. It is more than this. And one of the things I might just turn your focus to is in the last paragraph of my cover letter. I talk about decarbonizing and a clean energy future. But I also say, to this end, I believe in the regulatory compact between our state and regulated utilities, and recognize it as the regulator who ensures these critically important values of the state of Minnesota that are enshrined in state law: universal service, access, fair and reasonable rates. I'm telling the governor that this is what is important in a regulator, is somebody who can balance. And sorry, my phone is binging. It's somebody who's balancing these mega trends with really important, critically important Minnesota values. The host communities and what's going to happen with workers. These all have to be in balance. And I know what I was trying to tell the governor and the lieutenant governor in my cover letter is that the balance is what is critically important in a commissioner. Balance. And certainly, decarbonization and clean energy are important, but it's balance and understanding how it all works together, so that we're not driving up rates and we're not doing things that are detrimental to Minnesota communities, our economies, and that's what I was trying to drive at.
Okay. With that, we'll move on. Ranking Member Simonson, Senator Simonson, would you like to ask any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Sullivan, for taking the time to be here today. I've got just a couple of questions that I would like to talk about, and one you kind of touched on in your opening remarks, but it has to do with how you, in your regulator role now, separate your perhaps past advocacy work, perhaps your role lobbying for a particular organization or a particular policy perspective. And I think, those of us that pay close attention to the energy world understand that there are different ways to come at things, but it's very clear, I think to me at least, that your role as a regulator now, as a commissioner, is very different from some of your past roles. And you touched on it a little bit, but I wonder if you could just expand on that a little bit, so that we have a clear understanding of how you do that, because there's a personal challenge there too.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Senator Osmek and Senator Simonson, and thank you for that question. And I have been an advocate in my life, but I'm also a lawyer, and I'm a lawyer. So one thing that with my process, with the way that I look at these, the way I look at being a regulator today is very much, what is the record before me? What are the record and the facts that have been developed by the parties? And then what are the statutory requirements? What are the statutory guidelines, the rules that guide that record? And that takes me to a decision. That is what, and that is, I believe, the kind of a very straightforward process of how I look at being a regulator. I also come to why do I think it's important that this is the way that that the PUC, that commissioners should address these issues, is because I was an advocate at one point in the past, and as an advocate, it is critically important that that you trust that the commission is going to give you a fair shot, that they're going to listen to the four corners of your argument, and they're not going to dismiss it because they've got an axe to grind, because they've got a particular viewpoint. It is critically important that the regulator sits there, much like a judge, and listens to just the four corners and the facts in the case. And that's why one of the things that I've felt, and I know from previous commissioners, they feel it too, is you kind of feel a little bit lonely in the job. People don't talk to you. You are people aren't allowed to talk to you. And now that's maybe a little bit overly dramatic, but you get siloed, and but that's how it's intended. You are supposed to sit down, buckle down, read your statutes, read your rules, read the case laws as they apply, and look at the case before you. How does it apply to the case before you? And I like that. The lawyer in me enjoys that. That is the applying and being analytical and focusing on the facts at hand and the case law at hand. Does that
Senator
answer your
Simonson,
question?
follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Sullivan. I think you did add some good context there that we all should be mindful of. Making that jump from advocate to regulator is not an easy thing to do, and it could be very easy for somebody to fall back into that role of trying to follow along a particular path or listen to a particular argument. And I think that's critically important for you going forward, is that you continue that lawyer side of you and look at the facts and the evidence that are presented to you. Mr. Chair, a second question that I have revolves around these terms affordable and reliable, which is critically important, as you know, to northern Minnesota, as we have this discussion about transitioning to more carbon-free resources, or perhaps more renewable sources of energy. And this is where it gets really tricky, because we have a number of advocacy groups out there, and we also have a number of activist groups out there that would like to see us fast forward Minnesota's transition. And I think, as you know, and I think everybody on this call probably knows, that how quickly we do that has a direct impact not only on the affordability but the reliability. And Senator Osmek touched on some of this, but I just want to hear your comments on how the affordability and reliability factor into the decisions. And it's not necessarily the decisions on each certificate of need that you're going to consider, but you're going to be faced, even though perhaps people aren't talking to you directly, people are going to be talking at you, and you're going to be facing intense pressure, as is all of the members that will be here going forward. So how do you balance that, right? How do you balance kind of this social pressure with what the system is capable of doing, and what's affordable and what's reliable?
Mr. Sullivan?
Senator Osmek and Senator Simonson, I mean, affordability and reliability are central, and they go directly to the heart of the commission's mission, that we ensure that rates are just and reasonable, that that people can afford them, that they're competitive, and that is that goes directly to what we do and to everything we do. And in my view too, when we talk about affordability, we talk about reliability, and we talk about clean, it's clean has to be, it's all part of the mix. It's all part in the balance. And Minnesotans, not just Minnesotans, but Americans and people everywhere are not going to accept the lights going out. They're not going to accept prices that are incredibly high. And I mean, I think in your community, Senator Simonson, I'm very concerned about rates, and you have. And I know that Verso is not operating right now. They're indefinitely shuttered, and Keetac is indefinitely shuttered. I mean, these are incredibly important parts of the economy in northern Minnesota and Minnesota that I fully recognize that for them it's about affordability and reliability and making sure that that they can get their products to market, because they've got low input costs because of the markets they're in. And on the commission, we're asking Minnesota Power, we're asking Xcel, bring us your rate mitigation plans. We've recently allowed Xcel Energy to operate some of their power plants differently, which is saving ratepayers several $1 million a year. And so we're actively thinking about this. But fundamentally, when it comes to this issue of cost, I mean, the most important thing that the PUC does is scrutinize every proposal that the utilities bring us, and we put we make sure that we are analyzing it and looking at it and doing the economic work, doing the accounting work, making sure that we are really, really digging into those numbers. And today, because of both the pandemic and just in general because of economic conditions, we have to redouble that work. So it is they're critical cost and reliability are critical components of what we do.
Senator Simonson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that should do it for me for now anyway.
Okay. Senator Senjum, you had your hand up? Still on mute. Hold on a second, Dave. Great. Oop. No, still on mute. I love technology. There you go. You're up.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was toying with the idea, but of raising that hand, but nonetheless, since you called on me, so we'll just go ahead. Thank you, Senator Osmick, for having this hearing, and certainly thank you, Mr. Sullivan, for being with us today. Just fair notice, Mr. Sullivan and I go back to 2006. I, as a city council member from Rochester, working with Flaherty and Hood in the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, got to know Joe in those days, of course. Subsequently, as an advocate for different causes around the legislature, as a member of the Commerce Department, as a member of, frankly, my Thursday night energy conversation group, and now as a public utilities commissioner. And so, Joe, I look at you as one that's extremely well qualified from the standpoint of the processes and the systems that we work in and the expectations that we would have of a PUC commissioner. So, but let me I got a couple questions here, and you sort of alluded a little bit to just a moment ago. I want to kind of get to your decision-making thoughts in terms of a specific decision you made somewhat recently with respect to the seasonal ramp downs of a couple of coal-fired power plants owned by Xcel Energy, and a proposal by Xcel that they be allowed to ramp these down on a seasonal basis as the demand was less, and there were an opportunity, at least for Xcel, to save perhaps money, and the ratepayers, and subsequently save them money in this whole process. But nonetheless, for any PUC member, it was a decision because there's stresses on each side of that. You do the shutdown, it is going to affect employees, perhaps to some extent communities, and on that side, and on the other side, certainly it's going to affect ratepayers and costs on the positive side, if in fact that is your positive side. But so, Joe, with any struggle or decision you make, there's those kind of struggles. How did you kind of approach that one from the standpoint of the value of the ramp down and its effect on a community and workers versus the value of the ramp down and its effect on the the ratepayers?
Commissioner Sullivan?
Senator Osmek and Senator Senjum, thank you for that question. And the seasonal dispatch docket, I looked at it. I was we reviewed that record thoroughly. Just my process in that. I'll just start with my process. Reviewed the record thoroughly. I was briefed by staff, and then the way that I looked at it is I looked at, okay, let's what is Excel proposing here? And what I looked at, what I thought were the most important parts of the kind of the calculation were that one, ratepayers are going to see some significant benefit through savings because they wouldn't be purchasing fuel. I thought that was important. That's important, especially in a time when because of COVID and we're concerned about rates. I thought that that was an important piece to consider. I also, in terms of workers and the community, Excel has a long history of supporting their workers and supporting their workforce. And I was persuaded that Excel has plans for the workforce at the facility and at the facilities. And I felt comfortable that these communities and these folks were not going to be left out in the lurch because of how the operations at those units were going to be would be changing. And then I also thought that in terms of carbon and the carbon dioxide reductions, that Minnesota has a policy to reduce carbon emissions, and that this would be reducing carbon emissions from those units. And taken together, all three of those together, I netted it out, and I thought this is an innovative approach to move these units into a different type of operation, and that's why I supported it. I think that one thing to look at with the seasonal dispatch, which in my view is going on, is that that this is a way to keep these facilities operating. Even they're struggling on the market right now, and this is a way that these facilities can operate and transition better. So I was convinced that Excel's proposal to the commission had merit. I was convinced by the arguments that were in the record and the factual development in the record, and that's how I made my decision.
Thank
Senator
you.
Senjum, follow up.
Thank you. Perhaps just a general follow-up to a little bit of a different question, but to some extent maybe leaning in the same way, and maybe to some extent leaning towards a question Senator Simonson posed. But we all come to the decisions that we have to make with certain biases. They're just unavoidable. We are who we are. We've been where we've been, and we carry thoughts and relative to those experiences within life. Recognizing we all carry some biases, when you come to the Public Utilities Commission and need to make a decision, how do you separate your biases from your responsibilities relative to the decisions that you have to make?
Commissioner Sullivan.
Senator Osmek and Senator Senjum, and thank you for that question. That's it. The way that I separate my biases is that I look very critically at the statutes and what do the statutes tell us? What do the statutes tell us in this particular instance? How can they be applied? What do the rules tell us? Because I think that is the expression of the state of Minnesota through you and through the being enacted about how we should approach the situation. And sometimes it gets more difficult and complicated, and that's why there's a balance. But I try to separate, and just like anybody, I'm human. I agree, but I try to separate out by looking directly at what I do know, the plain language of the statutes, by my understanding of the legislative history and looking into it and deeply looking into it. And I think a good example is, with the line 3 decision. In line 3, I reviewed the record. I had more than 3 hours worth of briefings from staff. I reviewed video from previous decisions, and my determination was that the commission made the right decision on the merits based on the law. And that's why I voted the way that I did.
Okay. Well, thank you, and thank you, members. Joe, I just wanted to say, and for the members as well, I've known you a long time. I think you're a thoughtful individual. I think that you, again, address decision-making processes in the way that I would expect you to do, and expect any Public Utilities Commission member to do. You know the vocabulary. I think you know the stress points, and we to vote for you today as a conferee. I would be happy to support you in that vein. So thank you for being with us, and thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My apologies for tuning in about 15 minutes late. So if in fact this subject has been addressed already, Mr. Sullivan, you can say so, or Mr. Chair, you can say so, and we can move on. One thing that, Mr. Sullivan, you may be aware that the chair and I have in common is our interest in and support of greater focus on conservation and efficiency measures. And I don't know if we've had any discussion about your perspective or where you think those sorts of measures fit into the overall energy scheme. We talk a lot, of course, about carbon. We talk a lot about renewables and clean energy. We talk a lot about IRPs and certificates of need and the like. My view is that conservation efficiency is a resource, just like generation is. And so wondering what your perspective on that subject is.
And Senator Dibble, we have not had that question asked, so Commissioner Sullivan.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Osmek and Senator Dibble, thank you for that question. And as a regulator, the way that I look at energy efficiency and conservation is very much through the lens of the ratepayer and through the lens of the customers of our electric utilities. And I look at conservation as one of the, if not probably the most important way that an individual can reduce their bills, the price that they pay. And that these programs certainly are a resource for the system. I think that the data shows that on a megawatt hour basis, the conservation and energy efficiency account for almost 14% of our system. That's a lot of power plants that would have to be built if our utilities didn't have successful conservation programs. Those power plants that are not built would have cost ratepayers billions of dollars. So this is money that is well spent in avoiding infrastructure that a lower cost resource energy efficiency can meet. But I also look at it, especially in a time of COVID, one of the most important ways for people to control their energy costs is through conservation and energy efficiency. And that's why I talk about conservation and efficiency on the commission with regularity.
And Senator Dibble, I do agree with you, but I also will say that conservation does go eventually to the law of diminishing returns, that as you conserve, there becomes less and less to conserve and more expense to get that, squeeze the last conservation out. But I do agree with you on more and more on conservation from the first time we met. So, Senator Dibble, any follow-up?
Mr. Chair, we actually agree on that point as well. That we could spend a lot of money making a building so energy efficient that one candle burning in the basement would heat the whole thing. But would that be worthwhile?
Yet another meeting where Senator Dibble and Senator Osmek agree. Senator Osmek.
Glad I'm bringing us together.
God, there's an epiphany here. There's just like the clouds have opened, the sun is there, and it's a
Senator
front page.
Hoffman, don't tell my Senate district that this is happening, okay? This is being recorded, so.
I'm going to stand on top of Breezy Hill Point, David, and let the world know in St. Bonnie and Mound, you and Dibble are partners. I love that. No, seriously. And thank you, Senator Osmek, for bringing this discussion into place. And I just want to follow up on what Senator Senjum started to talk about. And what we know is important is commissioners that actually have some people skills, that can have a conversation without getting biased or getting politicized on some things. And, you know, one of the things, Commissioner Sullivan, that you have, and Senator Senjum alluded to this, is that you have a long history of absolutely working collaboratively with stakeholders to advance in legislation, and seeing how some of your latest votes were, you know, you absolutely probably took a lot of heat from the advocacy world, but you did, in what you had said, the decision-making process was plain language, statutory, legislative history. That was a thoughtful look at things. So talk to us specifically about the skills that you have. I mean, the skills of collaboration that you don't hear about that much, that you have, and on how those skills are going to make you be and continue to be an effective commissioner in light of where Senjum was going with that stuff.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Senator Osmek and Senator Hoffman, thank you for that question. I think that I have a, this is a difficult one. I have some kind of preternatural desire to hear from everybody. It's my mom, I think. She's a psychiatrist and she wants to hear and listen to people. And I think that's what it is. I want to hear from everybody. I don't think that I have on my own a lock on the truth. I think that I have my beliefs, my opinions, but I recognize that I could be wrong. And I really believe in crowdsourcing and listening to everybody, and that if we all come together and listen to each other, we'll make the best decision. And that's just the way that I approach things. And if you look at things that I've done, I think, the power plant study that I did, or the co-op study that the co-op interviews and work that I did, it was all about, I wanted to listen to, especially with the co-ops, I wanted to listen to their stories. I wanted to hear their stories. I wanted to know what they're doing that's beneficial for their ratepayers. Co-ops, they talk all the time about their members, and I get it. I mean, that's what they exist for, is their members. And I wanted to hear that, and I wanted to listen to it, and I wanted to tell the story. And that's the way I approach things. And I feel very strongly about that the best thing to do is to listen and to hear. And I have my opinions. I share them with people quite regularly. But I feel it's really important to listen and to hear. And the way that I think that helps the commission is, first of all, I think that I have on the commission, I tend to listen to my other commissioners, and I listen to where they're at and what they're thinking about. And I think that makes me fairly collegial, and that the people that I know speak for me and have said things about me will recognize that I'm collegial, and I like to talk to people. I like my friends, and I like getting to know why sometimes people don't like me. So and I kind of lean into it. But how that helps the commission in our daily work is, I believe that it drives to make a better record, and it makes the record and the parties before us. I try to elicit more information from them. I try to pull information out of them, and I try to make sure that they, are going to have, the ability to tell their story, because I think that makes for a better record and a better decision ultimately.
Follow up, Senator Hoffman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Sullivan, for that response. And that's what I was trying to get to, is, too many times people are personalizing things, right? And to hear you talk about how you want to hear every side of that decision, every side of that there, it sets aside those labeling and biases that could potentially be there. So I appreciate your honesty with that. And with that, Mr. Chair, I don't have any other questions.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the applicant? Senator Pratt.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Sullivan. I appreciated your answers today. I guess I just wanted to follow up with the conversation we had last week regarding, around this idea of bias. And, I had explained to you that it felt like there was a concern on my part that while we talk about the independence of the commission, and we've seen this in court cases at the federal level, at the state level, that political biases are raising their head in these decisions. And I think, I went back and read the letter, and I think it says, the part that kind of struck me was, talking about how you worked for the administration and wanting to continue to build upon that work, where I was concerned that there might be some bias, there might be some influence of the administration. Maybe talk to me about that and what you were thinking along those lines.
Mr. Sullivan?
Senator Osmek and Senator Pratt, and I reviewed the letter too, and one of the things that, in coming back to the letter after several months, was that I looked at it and I throughout the letter I talk about balance and the importance of balance. So the first thing that I think about is that my statements throughout here, I wanted the governor to know that I think that the most important thing in selecting a commissioner is somebody who recognizes that balance. And I really wanted the governor to know that, because if the governor didn't select me, I wanted the governor to select somebody who would care about that and who would think about that. And especially with reference to like the last paragraph where I talk about there's a historic opportunity to decarbonize. Also, that the where I'm talking about decarbonizing, I was trying to tell the governor and the lieutenant governor that this is happening. The decarbonization is happening. Clean energy is happening. And like I said, I think that's a good thing. I really think that's a good thing. I think it's important. But what I wanted the governor to know by connecting it into specifically these other values that we as Minnesotans hold true, things like, affordable rates, things like, universal utility service and access, and just basic fairness in how our utilities deliver their essential services. I wanted the governor to know that this is the balance that I think is critical for a regulator. And I do think there is direction in state law to decarbonize. There is we have the renewable preference statute, which was, as you guys all know, you've been talking about clean energy first for a little while. You know about the renewable preference statute. We have the carbon goals under 216H. We don't have specifics though. There's nothing in Minnesota state statute that says Minnesota has to be 90% carbon free by such and such a date. That's your job. That's not the job of the commission of the commission and the regulator. It's your job to, if you were to, I'm not telling you what to do, but that's the policy direction that is reserved for the legislature. That's what I was trying to tell the governor in the letter, that balance is the most important thing. And that, being an advocate for the governor's position, the governor doesn't need my help to be an advocate for his position. The governor has all the tools in the world to do that. I think what the governor needs and what the state needs, what the legislature needs, is it needs a commission that is balanced and is dedicated to looking at the statutes and the rule of law, and makes decisions impartially and neutrally. And that's what I was trying to tell the governor in the letter.
Senator Pratt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions? Last call. Any further questions? Seeing none, closing statements, Commissioner Sullivan.
Senator Osmic and members of the committee, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today with you. What I want you to know is what I've been saying throughout my testimony here today is that, I view myself as an economic regulator, and that the most important thing is that as an economic regulator, that Minnesotans know that I am looking at the record, and I'm constrained by, and I look at the statutes and the rules in front of me. That's what guides my decisions. And I think it's critically important, since we're dealing with essential services, that Minnesotans know that the regulators are fair, and much like a judge, that they knew that they had their day, and I think that's critically important. That's the way that I try that's what I bring to my job every Thursday when we have commission hearings. And I very much appreciate the opportunity to be here and to talk to you all. And if you have any questions, you guys all have my phone number, and you know how to get in touch with me, and I'm glad to take a call from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. Members, this is a per diem event, so if you do wish to have per diem for this, feel free to send a form into my office. I'll sign off on it. There may be an additional hearing before special session 4. Special session 4 being the worst kept secret, I think, on the planet. I'm not sure if we're going to need it, but I did want to mention that we may have one. There may be a bill that we can get agreement with the other body in the governor's office on for the special session, but there's no need for it at this point in time. But I will try and give as much fair notice if we do need to have that. Seeing no further action in front of this committee is adjourned. Thank you, members, for being here.
Thank you.